Should you even bother playing Feral Druid anymore? Should you just give up? Let's find out. We're going to read through this post written by Guilty on Wowhead. Why should and shouldn't... Why you should and shouldn't play Feral Druid in Dragonflight Season 2, patch 10.1, written by Guilty. So he is the Dreamgrove, or one of Dreamgrove's Theorycrafters, one of the Feral Theorycrafters. There's a whole group of them, but he is one of them. He does a lot of the guide writing for Wowhead, and so we're going to read through his post and see what we agree with, what we disagree with. Let's check it out. So we're going to break this down. So why you should play Feral Druid in Dragonflight Season 2 and why you shouldn't. Dragonflight was probably the most optimistic I've been for this spec in an extremely long time. The new talent trees and the statements by the dev team promised a return to a better era of Feral. It really felt like the issues that people had with the spec were understood by the development team and were being addressed. The new talent tree promised a return to a more iconic Feral playstyle. Absolutely agree. It was mega promising. In fact, I was like, all of this for little old me? Like, devs, are you really doing this? Like, you giving us all this stuff? Oh, amazing. Like, Feral's looking sick. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons across Season 1, this proved both true and untrue. Feral was a very strong spec in Mythic Plus across the entire season, and a very lackluster spec in Raid. I don't think a lot is changing in Season 2, but we'll talk about both the positives and the negatives and what it means going forwards into Season 2. I don't want to be overly negative, but at the time of writing this article, I'm definitely feeling a bit negative about the spec going into Season 2. Yes, I would just kind of caveat this by saying, like, I agree. I don't think much is changing in terms of our, like, for Mythic Plus, we're going to be roughly the same. We were played in the MDI a lot. We have been played in some of the highest keys in the world. We were very strong. At one point, we were a meta spec. Now things shifted a little bit, but that doesn't mean we're bad now. It just means that there's another spec that maybe does a little bit more damage than us. But that's okay. We can still really compete at a high level. And the highest Feral in the world is like 3,500. I'm 3,400. So, you know, it's like Feral can play right now. But going into Season 2, I'm a little bit more worried, you know, because we're not necessarily improving, and other specs probably are improving. So it's like, we need to be keeping toe with the inflation of other specs, you know? Why you should play Feral Druid in Season 2. If you enjoy how Feral currently plays on live, then good news. Very, very little is changing. The spec's receiving some changes to how Berserk functions, but the spec largely plays the same as it currently does on live. Yeah, absolutely. They're making some kind of buffs to Blood Talons. They're nerfing, what are you called? This one, Relentless Predator. They're nerfing that a little bit. They're making some minor changes to Rip. Cool. Adding in Dash and Claws. Okay. And then, yeah. Nothing's really changing too much. What does Feral bring? I know this is technically the section about why you should play Feral, but it's important to be honest, I think. Feral is in a bit of an odd spot. I actually think it brings a lot of tools and utility, and it even has a raid buff. However, it's a bit awkward because everything it brings, it shares with a healer, a tank, and ranged DPS spec on the same class. So while this spec has a lot of tools, it's quite frequently not the best way to bring those tools. Yep. However, Feral does bring a lot of tools. Dragonflight is really the first expansion where we've been able to share everything that other specs on the class bring. Feral's been locked into Balance Affinity pretty much always since affinities were introduced. With Dragonflight class tree, we're finally free to pick up some of the utility locked behind other affinities. Incapacitating Roar, Ursul's Vortex, Typhoon are all obtainable, providing a solid boon to the control Feral brings to a key or a raid. Of course, I can't forget to mention the big one, Innovate. Feral finally once again has access to it. It's been a while since this was the case, but finally we can rejoice. Nature's Vigil is another returning talent. In fact, in keys, this might be a significantly stronger gain than Innovate. I agree. This is an extremely powerful utility option for dungeons, since a lot of Feral's AoE damage is actually secretly single target damage. So a lot of people who might not know this, because I've been explaining it to people recently, go, what? So Feral does a lot of really good healing from Nature's Vigil. Even though it says your single target abilities do healing, what that actually means is, when you Primal Wrath, you apply a single target rip to every single mob. Each one of those individual rips is going to be single target damage, even though you applied it in one button. Your rakes, which are applying 2 at a time, are going to be individual rakes, which are healing. Your bites, which cleave everything, are going to be individual bites on every single mob. It's all healing that single target, but in an AoE fashion. It's incredible. It's fantastic. And then we also bring Mark of the Wild. Where is Feral strong? Currently, Feral's niche is largely in sustained AoE. The more targets, the better. The way the tree is set up and the way Feral's abilities function mean that sustained AoE is really where we shine. Our single target is pretty mediocre, and where we really sink down is when burst AoE is required. Because our strengths are focused around sustained AoE, it means that Mythic Plus is the area where Feral currently excels the most. Almost everything in our kit really excels in the environment that Mythic Plus provides. This is a bit of a shift from almost all of the spec's lifetime, but starting in Season 1 and going further into Season 2, I think it's even more so the case now. For Raid, this is a bit of a concern. The bosses we've seen so far are largely very single target focused, and there's very little sustained AoE. Yeah, I spoke to Guilty. I think he said as well there's some like burst ads or something intermittently as well, which again we're not going to function well on. The big thing is that like Feral's talent setup is like, right, I'm either pure single target or I am pure AoE. You can do some kind of like pure single target with just Primal Wrath and stuff like that, which can be nice, but you don't like burst damage. It's just like, yeah, you get extra damage, but you're not going to compete with a spec that's going like, you know, I don't know, like some of the spec that's just going to be able to absolutely burst AoE, like a Ret Paladin or a Windwalker or something like that, where they just have incredible burst on demand like that. Feral doesn't really have that. We want things to live for a long time and to be in large numbers. So the Berserk is being changed at 10.1 for Season 2, rather than the current live iteration where you count as stealth for the duration, and thus only affected Shred, Rake, and Swipe. Finishing moves refund 2 combo points. It now go Berserk for 20 seconds, while Berserk generate 1 combo point every 1.5 seconds. Finishing moves restore up to 3 combo points generated over the cap. So now you can technically overcap on combo points, and you're getting combo points. Instead of like doing a finishing move and then getting 2 restored, you're just going to get them over time instead, which is supposed to be like a more fluid introduction of them into your rotation. But the UI doesn't really allow for that, in my opinion. Like, the UI, they need to update the UI so that you can see, I mean, I've spoken about this before, when you're at 5 combo points and you start to overcap, the first 3 combo points should have a different color change or a graphic change or something to say, hey, you already have 5, and now you have an additional 2. You know what I mean? They should do something like that to help the player out. This is a pretty positive change for a variety of reasons. While it doesn't have a significant impact on the rotation, it does do a few very positive things. As it no longer a stealth tag, it now means that we can use talents like Sudden Ambush in Berserk rather than completely ignoring it. You're less discouraged from using abilities that aren't Shred, Rake, or Swipe. While this doesn't completely redefine how you play the game, it does make it slightly better. I absolutely agree. I think this Berserk change overall is good. I think it is good. Why you should not play Feral Druid in Dragonflight Season 2. Okay, so yeah, so in terms of all of this stuff, the review of this area, I agree. We've got some good utility. We do struggle with like playing against other, you know, other specs in our class are maybe more desirable in some ways. So that is a struggle for us. But I do think like in Mythic Plus right now, we're really awesome and it's really fun to play. And it's been very enjoyable to play if you're playing Blood Talons. If you're playing Lion Strength, it's probably dull as hell. But it's been very, very fun. The Berserk change looks pretty cool. I'm interested in trying that out and seeing more about it when I actually get into good content. In terms of why you should not play Feral, let's see. I don't really mean why you shouldn't play this spec. I also want to give you an idea of what the downsides to playing this spec might be and what problems you might face while playing this spec in Season 2. It's a bit hyperbolic. I've never known Guilty in my life to overreact to literally anything or be hyperbolic in any way. Oh boy. Oh, never mind. The Feral tier set for 10.1 is so incredibly dull and uninventive that when it was first revealed, I was so confident that it was a placeholder. Yeah, he actually came into my stream and I was molding over it and he was like, bro, it's a placeholder, relax. Like, bro, I can't believe you actually think it's going to go through like that. It's clearly a placeholder. Gives you agility for melee attacks. It's a placeholder. No, it's not Guilty. It is insane to me to this point that it wasn't. There's been trinkets that have been more enjoyable than this set bonus. At its core, the set bonus is really just stacking AG on auto attacks. Yeah, like, I would, if this was like a Season 1 tier set, I would go, okay, this is like really bad, but like, I get it for a Season 1. This is a Season 2. They should be a little bit more interesting by this point, right? People have had time to learn their spec and learn their rotation and stuff. So the 2 set, your auto attacks have a chance to grant Shadows of the Predator, increasing your agility by 1%. Each application past 5, so this stacks. When it gets past 5, each application has a chance to reset you back down to 2 stacks, and then you get your 4 set. So when you proc this, when it resets, you gain 5% increased agility, and you generate 1 combo point every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. Something interesting to note is you can be in this 4 set, and you can continue to gain stacks of your 2 sets. So you can get this like big stacking agility thing, which is good. As far as, from what I remember on PTR, I'm pretty sure that's still the case. So you gain agility and generate 1 combo point every 2 seconds for 8 seconds. It's very dull. Now, Guilty... Okay, well, we're just going to read what Guilty says, and then I'll give my thoughts on it. It says, incredibly dull. When it was first released, it was so boring and uninspired that I was confident it was a placeholder. I read all that. Did I read all that? I read all that. This set bonus is unconscionably boring. Unconscionably boring. I don't believe that's a word. The only impact it has on the rotation is to introduce a somewhat awkward ticking combo point generation that results in combo points being frequently wasted. It's spectacularly unfun to play with and almost enforces weak auras to track the combo point. It does. It forces weak auras. Track the combo point timing if you want to get any benefit at all out of the aspect of it. To add on to this, though, it's numerically not even particularly strong, while also having pretty significant issues with how it functions. It's not uncommon, especially Mythic Plus, to have the 2-piece drop off without proccing the 4-piece. I'd be interested to hear more about that, actually. It's not uncommon to have the 2-piece drop off without proccing the 4-piece. So I think that they made a change to this so that your stacks now last 25 seconds instead of 20 seconds, but they refresh each other. But I guess if you're chaining in between packs or something, I guess that can happen. Still can't get over the fact that this was greenlit to go live as a final product. This set bonus is a huge source of frustration to me, and its lack of changes is incredibly discouraging. You'll equip this because the item level increase will make it better, but you're unlikely to be happy about it. Yeah, so this is going to be really, like... I agree with Guilty, and I also just, like... I don't like it because I don't like... My biggest issue is the fact that it's RNG, so your auto attacks, which you have no control over, will randomly give you a stack of agility, which randomly will then dissipate and then give you these combo points. And unless you're paying very, very close attention or have a weak aura, it's going to be really hard to, like, adapt to that and see that and react to that. Now, the thing for me with Feral is very predictable in many ways. Even the unpredictable elements of it, say like Raging Fury, still predictable. You can do 3 generators, then look at where you're at. Are you at 5, or are you at 3, or are you at 4? This throws a spanner in the works, quite in quite a big fashion, and it's just very, like, it's uninspired. So I agree. I really dislike this tier set. I'm even considering not even using it at all and just using like an item level increase, but not using the tier set. That's what I'm genuinely considering, is not using the 4 set. I'm thinking about that. We will see. Where does Feral excel? What's on niche? Currently, we're good at fights that are sustained. This is for raid. Sustained multi-target with targets that live a long time. We're okay at fights that are primarily single target. We're bad to terrible on fights that have one primary target, but intermittent low health adds. So say a fight like Eranog, right? We're bad at that kind of thing. This is due to the way the talent tree works, with our AoE requiring a pretty heavy investment of points that do little to nothing on single target. Unfortunately, the raid looks to have a lot of exact kind of fights that I'd point at if I wanted an illustrative example of what fights Feral underperformed on. So this is the thing, like, this is the big thing that I was kind of alluding to earlier with the talent thing, is like, we don't, yeah, if we do go AoE, those AoE buttons like Primal Wrath and God's sake, Tear Open Wound, stuff like that, Double Clawed Rake, like, they have no additional impact on single target. So if you're investing in or Rampant Ferocity, for example, if you want to invest in your AoE, you are sacrificing single target for it. Now in sustained AoE, it's okay. Seems that to go along with baseline poor tuning, the raid looks not great if you're hoping to shine in raid. If this is your preferred content, it's yet another reason to be pessimistic about the upcoming patch. And the fact that Boomy still exists. How's the playstyle changed since launch? At launch, Dragonflight Feral was one of the most enjoyable iterations of the spec I've ever played. I was incredibly positive about it. It was a triumphant return to Feral, caring deeply about bleeds. There was an interesting set of abilities and plenty of things to optimize without, I think, being overly punishing. For really the first time in recent memory, Feral had superb AoE to the extent that it looked like it was going to be a huge strength. It really looked like a golden new age for Feral was dawning. Now, of course, it wasn't perfect. The spec still had problems. It was somewhat under-tuned on single target. There were some talents that were tuned poorly. The class tree was bad, still is, but it has an incredibly promising start. Since then, however, it's really only gotten worse. The rotation is gradually backsliding to no longer caring about bleeds, to optimizing almost entirely around bite damage to the extent that we ran Lion Strength over Blood Talents. This is a crime. This is an absolute crime that this was allowed to go through. It is upsetting. You should never have the passive talent be better than the active thing that you have to think about. Fortunately, that at least is being somewhat addressed with Bloodhounds making a somewhat muted return in 10.1. However, it's accompanied by talents like Thrashing Claws, removing an entire button from your rotation, and the cost of talents like Brutal Slash. The rotation might be marginally better to the live 10.0.7 rotation, but it's a far cry from the promise we had at launch. Yeah, the Thrashing Claws implementation, I think is a really bad idea, and it's a move in the wrong direction. I can sympathize with the issues faced by the tuning team. So all Feral single target and AoE are overly entangled to the point where there are very few areas you can tweak the spec. Tweak the spec in one without affecting the others. Tweak the speak? You can tweak the spec in one area without affecting the others. And Feral Strength in Mythic Plus means it warrants very few AoE buffs. Really, the spec needs the attention of someone who can untangle some of the interactions, split out Rip and Primal Wrath, reduce some of the areas where the spec is tangled up. Also needs a lot of attention in the class tree area, which has been bad for the entire of the experience so far. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm okay with the class tree. I've had success with it in Mythic Plus, and I feel like I can be an asset to my team and get enough done with the tree, and I can live pretty much anything most of the time. Initially, I was really pessimistic about the class tree, but I'm actually quite okay with it now. It could definitely be improved, and yes, I know that there's like other specs that can get things easier than we can and be more of an asset than we can more easily, but I'm generally okay with it. Generally speaking, yeah, the playstyle, I don't like that Bloodhounds has been so weak. I think it's a crime. I've been playing Bloodhounds all the time still because I just think like I want to enjoy it. I want my rotation to be more impactful, so I've been playing with it still. Now, final words. Since Legion, there are 2 times I've been genuinely pessimistic about Feral Druid going into tier. You know what? I don't think we'll even read the final words because I feel like this video is going to go on too long, and I feel like we got the gist of it. Generally speaking, going into the next patch, don't expect massive things with Feral in the raid, but expect some good things in Mythic Plus. And yeah, I think that if you really are passionate about playing this spec, you should continue to do so. And if you can play it in raid and get a group that will let you do that, then power to you. Get it done. Now, this is the tier set. Final thing. This tier set looks incredible. I love it. I think it's my favorite Druid tier set ever. It reminds me of like Wildheart, but like an updated one graphically. It's got nice bark that's not like over the top. The only thing I kind of dislike is the helm. But that's okay. I still think it looks really good as an overall set. And the wings, like wings made of leaves and tree bark, like really cool. The dress as well, I love it. I think it's awesome. So I'm excited to get it on. Excited to try it out. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed kind of just like this little breakdown synopsis of Feral in 10.1. Take care.